Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my February wrap-up. So, in terms of reading, February was a pretty good month for me, and I have fantasy romance to thank for that. I'm just gonna dive right in. I finished 13 books in the month of February, which is one of my highest reading months over the last couple of years, and that was for a total of 5,189 pages. I didn't end up DNFing anything. 3 of them ended up being arcs, and 1 of them was a reread. My series stats are not exactly where I would want them to be though, so in terms of all of the series, which is a part of some of the new things that I am tracking in my reading tracker, I ended up starting 7 technically new series last month, but I read 5 books that were continuing series and 1 book that was a standalone. As for the formats that I ended up reading, 8 of those I read only as an ebook, 2 of them I read both physically and as an ebook, 2 of them I read both physically and audibly, and 1 that I read physically, audibly, and in an ebook form. As far as the genres go, 8 of those were romance, 4 of them were fantasy, and 1 was just plain old historical. In terms of my star ratings, for brevity's sake, I am only going to have these rounded to the full star, because if I were to go down to the quarter stars that I actually rated them, it would just take up the entire side of the screen because there's a lot. So I ended up having 2 5-star reads, 10 4-star reads, and 1 3-star read. All 13 of the books that I read in February were in the novel format, and as for age range, 11 of them were adult, 1 was a new adult, and 1 was a young adult. So let's just jump right into what the books were, because otherwise we're going to be sitting here for a very long time. The first book that I actually started in January but finished the majority of in February was The Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder. This was an e-arc that I had gotten off of NetGalley, and it is an Indiana Jones kind of Sleeping Beauty gender-bent retelling in a fantasy world, I guess. So the prince is the one who is under the curse, and this girl who is from a noble family, she's not a princess, but she is a very Indiana Jones-esque character. She likes to go treasure hunting and look in old ruins and things like that, and she is destined to be the one to wake him from his sleeping curse, and she picks up a companion along the way who is kind of more along the lines of the princess. She is the heir to a clan of very warlike people from a different country, but she is on the run from them. She didn't want her responsibility of leading them, and that is her companion. And the 2 of them are traveling across this world to get to the castle where the prince is under this spell and save him from it. It was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It did kind of read a little bit more on the young side of YA. A lot of the things that the characters were thinking and discussing, they just felt very young, even though the things that they had supposedly done only really made sense if they were a little bit older in age, so I just kind of left a little bit confused about where they were supposed to be. I'm pretty sure they were 16 or 17, but they were talking about all of these previous feats and partners that they've had, and I was like, you are literally a kid. You have not had time to do any of these things yet. So that was probably my only nitpicky thing about it, but other than that, the magic system was really interesting. The characters were very entertaining. There was a lot of humor involved, and there was not really... They tried to take away the insta-love aspect of it by having the prince being able to appear to her as kind of a ghost-like figure, and so they got to know each other that way before she managed to get to the castle. So that helped it a lot, but it was still very young. Next up is a book that I've already spent a lot of time raving about, and I can hardly believe that this was this month, but that book is Jade City. I read this at the very beginning of this month. I listened to the audiobook, which is fantastic, and then I read a little bit of it physically just to read faster so that I could finish it faster. I fell in love with this. This was a solid 5-star read for me because, oh my god, the characters, the world, the writing, everything about this was amazing. I love all of it so much. I loved it so much that I put Jade War on my TBR for next month because I really, really want to find out what's going to happen next. I really love Hilo. I really, really love Shay. I'm really, really sad about other things that happened that I was not expecting to happen, but now that I know that the stakes are quite high for these characters, I'm probably going to be a little bit nervous for them going forward. I can't even rave about this enough. I know I talked about it in the weekly check-in that I did the week that I finished reading this, so I'm probably not going to go too more in depth on it here, but oh my god. I am so excited to move on in this series. It was so good. The audiobook narrator was amazing, by the way. I really wasn't expecting that, and I ended up absolutely adoring it. The next book is one that I do own physically, but I have loaned it to somebody now, so I'll have to pop a picture of it up over here, and that is the Bromance Book Club by, I think it's Lyssa K. Adams. This was fantastic. I don't know why I've put off reading it for so long, and if I had it here to hold up for you, I would tell you that I believe Z actually got me this physical copy of this book. She sent it to me for my birthday last year, so thank you, Z, for doing that. But yeah, well, oh my god. Okay. I don't even know where to begin. I loved the entire premise of okay, everybody's talked about the Bromance Book Club on BookTube already, so I know that I'm late to this game. But the premise is that a man and his wife are struggling. He is a famous baseball player, and he has found out via a fight recently that she's actually been faking the big O throughout their entire marriage. And obviously, this is a bit of a blow to his very fragile ego, and they're talking divorce and separation, and it's driving him insane. He's having a very hard time dealing with it. And his friends on the baseball team and a couple of people that are not on the baseball team kind of drag him into a book club in which these men all read romance novels to try and understand how to speak women's love language. And it was great. It was hilarious from beginning to end. The things that they took out of romance novels was, if you are a romance reader, if you have been a romance reader for any amount of time, you would absolutely love this, because all of the things that they talk about pertaining to romance novels as a genre is hilarious. The resolution at the end was really good. It was steamy. It was very steamy. Yeah, it was fantastic. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. There were couple of miscommunication things going on in the middle of it that really bothered me. His character in particular really irritated me in the beginning, but he did show growth. I'll grant him that, and he had to, because he had a lot of growing to do. But yeah, it was a great 4-star read for me. I read it literally in one sitting. I think I picked it up on a Friday night, and I just didn't move until I finished it. So it was fantastic. And it really put me into a romance mood, because I then immediately finished reading Alpha Foxtrot by Tracy Ward, which is a sports romance. She has an entire sports romance series about a fictional football team in Los Angeles called the Kodiaks, and the players on it finding love. And in this particular one, I've talked about this in a weekly check-in too, one of the football players is trying to kind of fix his image and ends up going on a very Dancing with the Stars like TV show, and is paired up with somebody who is a former Broadway star. She takes it very, very seriously. She takes winning very, very seriously, and it got dark. There were some very dark themes in Alpha Foxtrot, and it was really good. It was a little hard-hitting. The characters were fantastic. It was very, very steamy. And it was just a fun, quick little read that I ended up giving 4 stars. And then I immediately jumped into a different book in that same series. I didn't realize that Alpha Foxtrot was technically like book 5 or something. So I went back to the first book in the series, which is Rookie Mistake. And this is about a college football player who's about to go into the draft, and he's kind of trying to find an agent and be prepared to go pro, but in the college championship game, he gets his hand broken, and so everybody's very nervous about what his future is going to look like, because he's not going to be able to perform in the combine. And there is an agent who is brand new to her father's agency. She is trying to prove herself in the world, and she's been following him since he was in high school, like following his career since he was in high school, and she really, really wants him to be the first name that she signs. But she's kind of like fighting her dad for it, trying to prove to him that he's going to be worth it, and all of this other stuff. And stuff happens, they fall in love, and halfway through this book I realized I'm pretty sure I've actually read it before. This ended up being a reread for me, because I had a very strong feeling of deja vu from the beginning all the way to the end. And I don't really know why I never continued on with the rest of the series, but I will now that I know that it exists and remember that it exists and have read more than one book in it. I can't wait to go and read the rest of Tracy Ward's sports romances. So Rookie Mistake also got a 4 stars for me, and if you guys are looking for just like fun, quick to read romances, these are all on KU, and they were really, really entertaining. Before I move on to the other romances that I read last month, though, I am going to talk about The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, which I read and I didn't love the way that a lot of people love. I talked about this in my weekly check-in too. I guess I should stop saying that. Obviously, I talked about all of these in my weekly check-ins this month. That's why they exist. But I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. The audiobook wasn't great for me. The reading experience in general, I couldn't stay interested. Every time I tried to open it or open the audiobook, my attention just drifted and I just didn't find myself caring about anything that was happening. It's very atmospheric. You can't really say that it's not, and I am learning that I'm not an atmospheric reader in the slightest. I need plot to be happening. I need characters to be doing things. And while they technically were, it was more like the atmosphere was happening to the characters versus the characters making things happen around them. And that's really not what I enjoy. So this was 3 stars for me. I really don't know if I'm going to continue on in the series or not. And this is sad for me because The Bear and the Nightingale is very much a booktube darling, and I don't get to join in on that hype. I don't really see what everybody loves about this, but I know that I'm not an atmospheric reader, and that's why I didn't like The Night Circus either. So I think this is just gonna be not for me. Next up was the historical that I read last month, and that is The Red Palace by June Her. This is a historical, like a fictional historical retelling about a certain figure in Korean history, about slightly insane prince, I guess. But it doesn't follow him. It actually follows a woman who is a nurse in the palace, and she is kind of roped into lying for the prince and covering for him when he does something that he's not necessarily supposed to. And when she leaves the palace that night, she goes back to her former place of work at a hospital, and she finds out that there have been 5 women murdered there, and immediately just kind of decides that she's going to shove herself into this investigation. But while, like, at the very beginning of that, when she starts all of this, she learns that her mentor, the woman who is kind of more of a mother to her than her actual mother, is being accused of the murders, and she is under interrogation. She's being tortured. Immediately she decides that she's going to figure out who murdered these women so that she can save her mentor. While she's investigating this, she comes across a young man who is also investigating, except he actually is a policeman of some kind, and they kind of form an alliance and decide to try and figure things out together, and they sort of fall in love along the way, and it's very, very adorable. I don't think that was the best explanation of it, but if you are at all interested in a historical murder mystery with actual historical figures from Korean history, definitely give this a try. There were humorous moments, there were sweet moments, and there were some really, really dark moments too. I mean, it is a murder mystery. Like, it's very graphic at times, and that was really interesting to read, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I think that it's a standalone. I really don't see it going anywhere else. It wrapped up pretty nicely, but I do kind of wish that I could read more in that world. I'm used to saying that, but it's a historical, so I guess it's this world. I guess I should say that I'm looking forward to reading more things that author writes. Okay, diving back into romance, I read King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This is from an unplugged book box that I got while I've been a rep for them, and I loved this so much. You guys, this is a fantasy vampire romance, except you get everything from the perspective of the human girl that the vampire king falls in love with. It is first-person POV, and Isolde is a princess who is essentially selling herself to this vampire king to try and protect her entire country from him invading it and taking it over. Her country believes that the vampires are evil and that they're going to kill everybody in their path, and they're just these mindless, soulless, blood-eating monsters. And he comes to her country and he meets with her father, the king, and he says that the only thing that will stop him from invading, and it will instead be a peaceful handover of power, is if the king allows Isolde, his daughter, to marry Adrian, the vampire king. It's arranged marriage, forced marriage trope, enemies to lovers for sure, and it was very, very good. I would be lying if I said I didn't find Isolde very annoying at times. I don't think that I'm in the minority on that either. I think that a lot of people find Isolde kind of irritating, but I was in this for Adrian 100%. I wish we could have gotten it from his POV instead. Hopefully, maybe that'll happen in the future. The twist was not necessarily something that was surprising to me. I don't know if it was supposed to be or not, but it happened. There is one. There is a twist that happens. This is a series also, so something is going to continue. There is a big bad that they didn't get to defeat necessarily. So that'll be moving on, and I'll be interested to see where this series goes next. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, next up again is Blood and Honey. This is by Shelby Mahurin. This is the second book in the Serpent and Dove trilogy, and it's taken me a year to read this. I read Serpent and Dove in 2020, and I loved everything about that book. I read it practically in one sitting. The cover is gorgeous. Also, we've got to really appreciate the covers of these books. So I won't talk about what happens in Blood and Honey, but in Serpent and Dove, it's enemies to lovers, in which a witch is in a forced marriage to a witch hunter, and he doesn't know what she is, but she knows what he is, and then he finds out what she is, and it's this whole thing. Obviously, he's got to like figure out his beliefs and whatnot, and it was really good. It was definitely more new adult than actual YA, I would say. There was a steamy moment that happened in the first book, and that happens again in the second book, so I don't think I would quite say that it's YA. But the second book fell a little bit short for me. It was still probably a 4-star, barely. It maybe on the high side of 3, because of the decisions they were making and because of the stupid choices and the stupid thought processes that the two main characters had. It was driving me insane. I spent so much of this book just wanting to slap both of them across the face, in all honesty. So I don't know. I want to read Gods and Monsters. I have Gods and Monsters. The end of this book really pissed me off and was definitely very cliffhangery. So I do want to move on. I have it moved over to my TBR shelf already. So yeah, I mean, Blood and Honey was okay, but it was not nearly the level of love that I have for Serpent and Dove. And for the record, if I don't like Gods and Monsters, I am totally going to move forth just calling Serpent and Dove a standalone. Technically, things were not wrapped up in the end, but like the love story that I wanted to be wrapped up was wrapped up instead of being turned around and flipped upside down and all of that shit in Blood and Honey. For brevity's sake, I'm going to lump the next 4 books together because I read the first 4 books of the Demigods of San Francisco series. There's only 6 books in this series. It's kind of comprised of 2 arcs. The first 3 books are the first big bad guy, and then the second set of 3 books is the second big bad guy. So the Demigods of San Francisco series follows Lexi, who is I think she's kind of like a ghost whisperer, but she thinks that she's very unpowered and her magic is useless. So she's kind of stuck in this non-magical / magical purgatory kind of place. So San Francisco is divided into the magical section and the non-magical section, and then there's a section in between that's called the dual zone. And she lives in the dual zone where she can take care of her 2 wards, who is a very, very sick shifter, who his body is kind of fighting off the shifting magic inside of him, and it's giving a very immune system-like response to the magic, so he's very, very sickly. There's nothing that they can do about it. They just don't have the money to pay for the procedure that would fix this in him. And then she also has another ward who is non-magical, and she's kind of just stuck taking care. She wants to. She's not stuck. That was probably phrased badly. But she is taking care of these 2 as though they are her kids, and she has a very hard time holding down any jobs. She's very, very broke. All 3 of them are very much so living below the poverty line. And one day she is walking home from the store when somebody almost hits her with his car. His very, very nice, very, very shiny, very, very expensive car. And she kind of throws a lot of shade at him and talks attitude, and he is very intrigued because he senses a lot of power coming from her and would like to know more about it. So Kieran starts kind of low-key stalking her in a not great way, but like he's not trying to do it like sexually. He's just interested in what she has the ability to do. And so kind of starts like shadowing her to find out more about her ability, and in so doing finds out about the kids that she's taking care of, and it strikes a soft spot in his heart, and so he starts wanting to take care of her and the kids as well. And it all kind of comes to a head when he finds out that the type of magic she has is exactly the type of magic that he needs to be able to save the spirit of his mother, who is trapped on the other plane, I guess you could call it. And it's this whole thing, and so they fall in love, and it's very, very cute, and it takes place over the course of 6 novels. Well, the first part takes place over the course of 3 novels, and then they're wrapped up, but then there's a new bad guy for the next 3 novels. So, obviously I really liked them. I read the first 4 books over the course of like a weekend, and they're easy, quick, romantic fantasy reads, like paranormal romance. The banter is entertaining. The characters are pretty hot. It's very steamy, and it was great. It was a fun, quick romance read for farofeb, and I read 4 of them in like 5 days. And I ended up giving all of them 4 stars. I do want to continue on in the series and read the last 2. I enjoyed them enough that I would like to see where things wrap up, but like I was so satisfied with the way that the arc in the first 3 books wrapped up that I just didn't care as much when I got to book 4 and the new bad guy. So I might give it a break before I dive into the remainder of the series, but I am really interested in reading more from K.F. Breene. I've heard really good things about Demon Days Vampire Nights, and so I'd like to give those a try now too. Okay, so quick honorable mentions for 3 books that I'm currently in the middle of and need to wrap up very, very quickly. because I've got a lot of readathons happening in the next month that I need to take care of, but I am still currently reading Age of Ash by Daniel Abraham, and you can look at my weekly check-in that I posted earlier this week to see what my thoughts are on that so far. I am also still in the middle of Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. Again, look at the weekly check-in for my thoughts on that so far. And I'm still reading House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, because I haven't had a chance to really dive into this and read it, and you can't really go to my weekly check-in to see my thoughts on this, but I will be posting a reading vlog that I'm doing for it at some point that will have all of my spoilery and non-spoilery thoughts in it. So yeah, I'm really loving this. That's all I'm gonna say for now. Also, either tonight or tomorrow, I really need to get around to reading Deadly Class, which is the graphic novel that I picked out for February. I have 2 days left. I have today and tomorrow to read it. Hopefully I can knock it out pretty quickly, but I do plan on finishing that this month still because it was on my TBR. And then the very last thing that I wanted to mention was, don't forget, if you haven't seen our announcement, Z from You Can't Catch Z, Lauren from Lighting Lavender, and I, we are all going to be doing a Belgariad along, which is a read-along for the Belgariad series by David and Lee Eddings. This is going to be taking place from March through July. We're going to be reading one book in the series every single month and doing a live show on all of them to talk about our thoughts. So the first book is Pawn of Prophecy. We're going to be doing that throughout the month of March, and our first live show is going to be the weekend of April 2nd and 3rd. We're not sure specifically on the date yet, but if you are interested in this, if you're interested in a classic fantasy that has a very chosen one farm boy trope, we are going to be reading it. It's pretty short. I think it's probably less than 300 pages. In my bind-up volume, it's like 192 pages, so it's going to be a quick and easy read. It's going to be a lot of fun, so I hope you guys can join us. Okay, I've been talking for a really long time, but that is it for all of the books that I read or am reading throughout the month of February. I will try and link all of the books that I talked about in the description box down below, and while you guys are down there checking it out, don't forget to hit that like button if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content from me. Also in the description box, you're going to see a rep code for Hello Lovely Book Box, which is CAT15 for 15% off of your order. Underneath that are links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you guys wanted to follow me on any of those. But that's it for me today, guys, so I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye!